Network risk is one of those things that affects every company, companies that don't even realize it. From the technology sector, through healthcare firms, through health service providers, and through even what you would think of sort of old line industries, from manufacturers, through distributors, through companies that sell. Pretty much everyone has network risk. And it involves things like data breaches, it involves things like hacking, it involves things like your data being unavailable. And when I tell people, I say, look, what company exists that doesn't have data, that doesn't have customer information, that doesn't have information that should remain private, whether it be social security numbers, or whether it be credit card records, or health records for companies that are in that space, or the access to or the hosting of information, private information that helps a company run. That's all the type of information that's within what we think of as sort of new cyber liabilities, network risk questions. And when I talk with companies about that, they all realize we all have that. And of course, who doesn't have information? You wouldn't be a company running without customer data and payment information. One of the biggest things is a data breach. And that can happen in a couple of different ways. Sort of what we think of today as a more modern data breach. Let me give you an example. There was a young man, 23 years old. He and two of accomplices have been indicted on having stolen 175 million credit card records. And at $202 per credit card record stolen, you're talking $35 billion. Wow. And he allegedly stole it from companies like TJX, the parent company of TJ Maxx, DSW Shoe, other companies that we've heard of, the chains that we've used on a regular basis. And even smaller companies. I have a client where they sell a very commonly known household product, and they allegedly had a data breach for a company you would think, why would they be hit? But that's the stories that they were. And so if you have information, if you've got credit card data that you store someplace and it's stolen, that's extremely expensive to deal with the implications of that. That's just one example. Another example is what you would think of as less traditional, where a company that was, I believe it was a hospital out in Utah, had given their information, their backup tapes on health records to a security company and to be put it into secure off-site storage. And you think, okay, we can't really get any better than that in terms of protection. We're giving it to professionals, right? Well, it turns out that the information in this locked box was stolen out of the car of the driver, who decided rather than go right to the storage site to take a nap for a little while. And so here was all of this health record information, personal information, stolen out of the car, and then the owner of the information had to deal with the question of, now what? And they had to notify people, and they had to do a variety of things, all of which were expensive. And last I checked, they've been litigating with their insurance company as to whether that sort of thing would be covered under their policies. The most traditional one we think about is property damage. So if you have what the insurance industry would say the most traditional one is, you have a server farm, or you have your server room is destroyed by fire or something else that might be covered. That's sort of your most basic. But then there are other things like, what if your data is lost? In terms of, what if you have a lightning strike that hits and resets all of the settings that you had on your mainframe computer? It's a case from a few years ago out of Arizona, where there's a question, would that be covered under a traditional property insurance policy? Something else is what we call business interruption, which says, if you had something go wrong where you can't run your business the way that you had been, there's insurance for that. So what if you rely upon a cloud, private or public, and the cloud is the data that you have on the cloud, or your applications that you have in the cloud, become unavailable to you for one reason or another? Will your insurance cover that? Or if you rely upon something else, would there be contingent business interruption, where your company alone hasn't had a problem, but someone that you rely upon does have a problem? That's contingent business interruption insurance. And those are some of the first-party risks or crime questions in terms of if you've had, again, a data breach where data is stolen. All of those are what I would consider to be first-party risk examples. There are 46 states that have data breach laws as of this filming. And Massachusetts most recently updated their standards in terms of data and what you have to do with it. They've made it so that you have to encrypt data, and they have other requirements. And so if you're a company that does business nationally, you've got to worry about 46 states. You've got to worry about territories such as Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. You have to, if you do business internationally, you have to worry about the EU's privacy requirements. And so it's a pretty complex web in terms of the concerns you should have if something goes wrong with your data. And so, for example, if you lose a laptop in a, let's say it's in a bar, you forget it on your way out, or if it's stolen from someplace, and you've got private information on there, you have to be concerned about the various states' laws. In addition, there's federal laws out there in terms of there are particular ones for the healthcare industry. The HITECH Act and HIPAA have requirements in terms of what you have to do if there's been a data breach. Now, whatever your political persuasion, many people argue that this really is an area that's ripe for a single federal law. So rather than worrying about 46 different state laws and worrying about the overlapping federal laws, we can have one standard. There have been some bills that have been circulating through Congress in both houses, but as of right now, there hasn't been one federal law that would cover all of the requirements in the 46 states. I think going to a cyber liability policy first is a great step, because the coverages that you buy and the limits that you buy are almost certainly going to be higher than your CGL, your commercial general liability coverage. CGL coverage oftentimes has a limit of about $1 million, maybe up to $5 million, but oftentimes with a deductible. Whereas cyber liability coverages, the limits can be significantly higher. Of course, you have to keep in mind your sublimits and the like, but if you can buy $5+ million of cyber coverage, it's a great place to look to make sure that you've got sufficient limits that are available. And when you think about $202 per record of hard and soft costs that are involved with a data breach as an example, and you think about the costs involved with credit monitoring, that could run through your CGL coverage pretty quickly if you are able to convince your insurance company that that's an appropriate place to have it covered. You should be able to, but it may take a little bit of pushing. Your cyber coverage, again, provides, I would say, a great place to start. It's overlapping coverage oftentimes with other things like your CGL and possibly crime or other coverages. But the amount of limits that are available and the specialized coverages and the specialized limits that may be available. For example, you may be able to buy specialized coverage in terms of providing credit monitoring services. You may be able to buy specialized coverages such as your unique ability to respond and crisis management coverage. That probably will be found in a special limit in a cyber policy, allowing you to have the money that you need for an expensive claim like this. Not to say that you shouldn't also look to other policies, but in terms of making your response be the strongest response available and making sure that you have the best resources and assets available to you, starting with a cyber policy that has a good set of limits is a great place to get rolling. And a cyber liability policy, if you've bought one, and I recommend that you do, is the first place to start, because obviously that's at least the title of the policy. Start there and see what you have and figure out, are there sufficient limits available, and understand what your deductibles are so that you can get the coverage that you need. But keep in mind that if you have other policies, which most companies do, look at that entire suite so that not only may there be overlapping coverage, but it may be the situation where your deductible could be affected, or you may have different levels of deductibles. You may have more coverage in terms of your overall aggregate or per occurrence limits that are available to you, so that if the amount of the claim were to exceed the level of coverage you have under one policy, you may have more that could cover and provide you the amount of money in the recovery that you need under your entire program.